So welcome to our Boost webinar this morning. The webinar will be recorded, so I just want to note right off the bat that if anyone has any issues with that, you can just send me a message in the chat. We do encourage folks to be on camera if you can, just because it's nice to see some faces in the crowd. I'm joined by some of our project team today that I can see. We have Kelsey, the QI coach, and I believe Honke is also here, our Boost medical lead, and we might have some other team members joining as well. You can type your name in the chat and where you're joining in from as we get started here as well. I do want to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional, ancestral, unceded, and occupied homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, including the 7 Interior Region First Nations, where we live, learn, collaborate, and work together. This region is also home to 15 chartered Métis communities. It is with humility that we continue to strengthen our relationship with First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples across the interior. We also want to acknowledge that others may be joining from different traditional homelands today. This acknowledgement is a reminder of the discriminatory, racist, and colonial practices that have had a lasting legacy and continue to create barriers for Indigenous peoples in the healthcare system. This is just a note that Boost is funded by the Health Canada SUAP program and Shared Care. So just a thank you to our funders and our client partners and family voices. I'm not going to go over the Zoom control panel. I'm sure lots of you are quite familiar with that. But I do want to note that we have a couple of anonymous Zoom polls today, one at the beginning, one at the end of the webinar, as well as a really short long answer survey that will pop up in your browser. We do encourage you, if possible, to fill those out. It's just helpful for us to get that feedback on our end. So next up, I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Allison Kite. Allison is the practice lead with substance use services, the practice lead for peer inclusion with the substance use services team with the MHSU network and Interior Health. Allison has a master's in leadership from Royal Roads University and a bachelor's in anthropology from the University of Victoria. Allison's work focuses on engaging and including people with lived and living experience of substance use in all levels of the healthcare system and service planning and delivery. She is passionate about ending stigma and strengthening organizational culture that values lived expertise alongside learned expertise. So we did have Allison join a webinar for Boost back in the summer, but it was identified as an area that we should touch on again. So Allison will be discussing this again and expanding a little bit on that. And yeah, so I'm going to pass it over to you, Allison. I will just stop sharing my slides.
Thanks, Angie. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me back. Let's see if I can, here we go. So I'm hoping that today this presentation can be fairly informal. So really feel free to, even if you want to ask questions as we go, you know, if there's somewhere you want me to stop to provide a little bit more information, I'm very happy to do that. I didn't provide quite as much background about the peer inclusion and engagement project this time because I have presented on it not too many months ago. But of course, there'll be some new folks, so happy to provide more detail where you need it. I am going to open the chat, but please feel free to unmute as needed to just speak up because it may be hard for me to keep track of the chat and I'm not sure if I'll see your hands raised or not. So
sorry to interrupt. Sorry, we can keep an eye on that too for you, Allison. I'll keep an eye on anyone who has their hand raised and just prompt you.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So thank you, Angie, for offering that beautiful land acknowledgement. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the substantial loss and devastation caused by the war on drugs and its racist and capitalist underpinnings. Our work, this work to include people with lived and living experience, is rooted in respect, love, and great appreciation for those we have lost in the drug war and those who continue to fight for survival. This is what we're hoping to cover today. So first, to understand the options for involving peers in planning and or delivery of substance use services through the Interior Health Peer Inclusion and Engagement Program. To understand who can support you with honorary and paid peer involvement in your area. To understand the process to engage honorary and paid peers as advisors or in service delivery. To know where to go to find the tools and resources, and also to discuss how to seek funding for peer employment, should that be your goal. And of course, we'll spend some time on any questions you may have. So just to start, we do define the term peer within the context of our work here at Interior Health. A peer has a role within an IH substance use service or advisory group where their lived experience of substance use, whether past or present, is identified and central to their role. And peer work in IH is only considered such if it draws on and is directly related to lived experience and also happens in a health promoting and or harm reducing context. Now, we make that clarification for a few reasons. One is that the term peer is not always the preferred term. There are individuals with lived experience that don't prefer that term. And so while we use the term, we hold it lightly. And when we're developing new roles, new peer roles, we have a conversation with the individuals that have been recruited into those roles. And sometimes we come up with titles that don't include the term peer. And one example of that is a lived experience educator. We also make this distinction because there is quite a lot of peer work, excellent, grassroots peer work happening in communities all across the country. And sometimes there are examples where people with lived experience are recruited into roles that really don't have a lot to do with health promotion or harm reduction. So things like cleaning up spaces or tasks that really don't require lived experience. So we like to make this distinction to make sure that as you're thinking about the types of roles you would like to have peers doing, that you just consider that piece around really requiring lived experience and utilizing lived experience in the role. Here are two quotes about the importance of peer involvement, both from the World Health Organization. People with lived experience are experts and necessary partners to advocate for the respect of their rights, but also for the development of services and opportunities that are most responsive to their actual needs. As experts by experience, peers are able to uniquely connect with and relate to individuals going through a challenging time because of firsthand knowledge and experience. So our program aims to lead and support initiatives that increase and improve Interior Health's ability to meaningfully and safely engage peers in the planning and delivery of substance use services across the region. And these are a few key areas that this project and program works on. So first, we've developed a number of structures. We have a peer advisory group, as well as a peer volunteer program where those volunteers are paid honorariums. Both of those are very low barrier options to include people with lived or living experience. We also have a community of practice for all different Interior Health peer roles, including employed peer support worker community practice. And then we also have a community practice for Interior Health peer supervisors. So non-peer colleagues, team leaders, managers who really want to learn about how to do this work well. Then we have a number of standards. We'll take a quick look at our toolkit today. We also have a framework that outlines different types of roles and what sort of levels those roles fit within and the associated honorariums or employment that would be attached to those roles. And we also have a standard to pay honorariums, whether that's cash, direct deposit, or check. There's a number of training and educations that are ongoing. We do a lot of work to build capacity for peers and also for people supervising peers and for non-peer colleagues. And we also do many presentations for leadership as well to continue to socialize or this really new way of doing the work where we are really including people with that lived expertise alongside learned expertise in our healthcare system. So when employment is not an option, so if you're not looking at a peer support worker role, if you're, your program doesn't either, have funding or there isn't really room for that core member of the team to come in as an employed peer, we have honorary and paid peer employment opportunities. So this is where there's really two paths that you can choose. And you just really want to think about, am I looking for a one-time or occasional opportunity to really talk to or involve people with lived experience in my work? And in that case, you would really be looking at the peer advisory group option. So this is, I think we have over 160 people now, so with very diverse experiences that are all on our contact list. And every time we have an opportunity that comes up, we write up a little poster and send out an email and say, hey, there's a chance to perhaps, advise on the OAT program in Vernon. Maybe they, want to hear from people who have experience with OAT or people that OAT hasn't worked well for them, and they want to talk about why that is and try to help inform their program. And so in that case, we can support you in recruiting a group of people to come together. They can come together in person or virtually. And really, we can even co-facilitate with you an engagement session or more than one session to get that feedback to help inform your program. So that's the peer advisory group. If you think you want someone with lived experience to help deliver your service or to be involved in a more regular basis, and maybe that's once or twice a week or even just once a month, or if you have a particular task force or initiative or project you're working on that has a set term, it's a year-long project, then we can help to recruit an honorary and paid peer volunteer. And often that's what we do when we're talking about service delivery. And we have many, many examples of this. And if this is something that you're looking at, we're happy to also help connect you with other programs and services where they have on peer volunteers. And we can talk through that a little bit more. Are there any questions at this point before I continue? Okay, on we go. So a little bit of exciting news is that we've been able to invest a little bit more money into peer coordinator roles. And peer coordinators are usually a DASW position. We've had them in Kelowna, Penticton, Kamloops, and Vernon for some time. And that role, the purpose of that role is really to support integrating peers into various services within that given community, and also to help build capacity in the peers as well as connect the peers to those advisory opportunities. So many peers, if we look at Penticton, for example, they've got quite a robust peer inclusion program there, all led by their peer coordinator, Leah Connell, but together with team leaders who have those peers working on their teams. So Leah, in her role as peer coordinator, oversees the recruitment of those peers. She provides some check-in support with them. She makes sure that they have access to all the training that they need. She handles their peer honorarium payments, so kind of checks on their timesheets and make sure that goes smoothly. If they need a wellness day, they might check in with her. And so she really can support them and also support those team leaders when there are challenges that come up. She can sort of, problem solve, troubleshoot, and really also then look for new opportunities to expand the peer program into new areas. Kelsey.
Hi, thanks, Allison. First of all, this is really helpful to see this overview of who to contact in which areas. I do have a couple of questions. So I recognize that, so there isn't anyone in Merritt right now, but would the person in Merritt, or is there another, perhaps maybe Williams Lake, I'm not sure, serve some of those smaller kind of in-between communities? Like I'm thinking we have a team from Lillooet Ashcroft area. So would there be somebody that would support them? And then also I'm seeing that there's Nelson and Trail, but for example, we have a Castlegar team as well. So
great question. So you'll see, so the Williams Lake, Merritt, Cranbrook, and then the Kootenay boundary roles are new, and they're in the process of posting and hiring. So yes, both Williams Lake and Merritt have identified that they would like the peer coordinator to consider and support peer inclusion where it makes sense in the larger region. So including those smaller communities. In the Kootenay boundary, we did something a little bit different. And so because it's considered one of the 8 areas, Kootenay boundary, but of course geographically has a number of communities. So in that area, there are 3 substance use connections workers. And even though they're located in Nelson Trail and Grand Forks, they share Castlegar, sorry. So the idea there is they each will have about the equivalent of a day a week that they can put towards peer coordination, and between them, in the same way that they share the substance use connections work of Castlegar, they'll do that for peer coordination as well.
Okay.
Now, but what I would say, and this is an important part, is that these peer coordinators will be quite new in their roles, and they also have to negotiate with their own managers and their team leaders about what is their capacity to support peer inclusion. And we're certainly, we're at an exciting point where, all of those 4 areas along the bottom of the slide, it's quite new. So often what happens is it's kind of a good time, to come forward and say, hey, this could be interesting. Could we explore this? But it really will be, the manager together, often with their team leads, will sort of decide what's the best fit. They'll want to start in a really good way, have success with, especially with the first, 1 or 2 honorary and paid peer volunteers that come on board. So, I would encourage you to start thinking about, what you think the needs are, to give them a little bit of time to hire, and then have a meeting, to kind of discuss what your ideas are. In the meantime, you can see that IH Peer Advisory email at the bottom there. So that goes to myself and my colleague, Jamie Pereira. Jamie does a fantastic job of receiving all of the requests for advisory group engagements as well as volunteer positions. And so, we would look at what can we consider in the meantime? And even we could potentially reach out to managers and find out what timelines are like for hiring and have a bit of a conversation. But our future state, these will be kind of your key people, one or more in each community or each area to manage that peer coordination.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
No worries. Oh, thanks. Oh, Tina's on the call there. The peer coordinator based in Merritt will support peer inclusion in Chase, Ashcroft, Clinton, Lillooet, Lytton, Merritt, and Logan Lake. Thanks very much, Tina. Any other questions right now? The one other thing I might say is, if you get a no, so, Vernon is a great example. Vernon has a very robust peer inclusion program at their OPS, and they have a lot of peers involved, and that takes up a lot of Carrie's time there. So, that might be a community where there's there may be less capacity to grow the program into various other areas. So if that happens, that's where you can contact Jamie and myself, and we can just look at what's possible. So peer inclusion has been done in other areas where we don't have a peer coordinator, because we've had an interior health staff who's the champion, who decides that they have that capacity to take that on. It's often been a team leader. And we, in those cases, go a little bit small. So maybe it's one peer volunteer that joins their team, for a few hours a week to get started and see what it's like. So here are some of the supports that we can provide from the substance use team. So around the peer advisory group, this is where, if you want to reach in and check out, some of your ideas or a new initiative or your program, to really get that input from someone with lived experience. We can help with scheduling, with recruitment, coordination, and if needed, co-facilitation of engagement sessions. We have templates for note-taking and reporting out afterwards, and we can support with that. And we can also help with ensuring that everyone that was involved is provided that honorarium. On the peer volunteer side, we can help with role development. And that's a really important first step, is really kind of trying to understand, what is this role? What will their responsibilities be? And what's expected of them? And then recruitment really flows from that. We can support with sort of the interview coordination, so communicating with candidates and scheduling them and setting up those interviews to help you determine who's the best fit. And also support with honorarium payments, training. So we have quite a bit of training available to our peers. And then we can also support with that integration into the team. And so that can look a couple of different ways. We actually have a wonderful handbook that one of our knowledge coordinators, Erica McLaren, created, that really is for team leads to support that integration of peers into teams. But Erica included, is also very happy to come and actually work with your team and join some team meetings to help do some of that orientation piece that just sort of readies the team to have a new member join. So we have over 100 members with lived or living expertise of substance use. They do currently represent at least 18 different communities and nations. And as I mentioned before, have a very widely diverse types of lived experience. And that's really our goal. We want to make sure that we have great diversity in lifestyles, in experiences with substances, and experiences around harm reduction and different types of recovery approaches. And we also really look for diversity in genders and ages, in geographically where they live in the community. We have a number of people who identify as Indigenous and do a number of Indigenous specific engagements. And we're in the middle of shifting over to a new secure data management system that will actually also give us a little bit more information about whether people do self-identify as Indigenous, and give us a little more information to those demographics, which is going to even further improve our recruitment of diversity. So when you're wanting to engage that peer advisory group, there is a step-by-step process. It is in our toolkit, and I'll point you to the toolkit in just a couple of minutes, but that's really your process to read. And then you would work to confirm if you have a budget. So you would go to your manager, or if you yourself manage a cost center, confirm that you have a budget. If you do not, you can contact the peer advisory at Interior Health, and we can chat about whether it is a type of initiative that we could potentially support with our regional peer budget. And it's really as simple as then submitting an engagement request form, which is within this process here, to the same email that then Jamie would receive and get back to you and work with you. She'll draft up how does this look, for a recruitment email, and you can provide your edits, and then she sends it out to our peer advisory group, and away we go. So a little bit more involved when we're talking about peer volunteers, but same process. So it's just that the process here is slightly longer because it includes things like screening and training, and we do an interview process. There's a little bit more involved when we're bringing someone into our team to help deliver an interior health service. But still, working on confirming that budget. So you'd work again with your manager, looking at your program cost center to determine, what type of budget you have. If there's no budget, reach out to us and we'll talk about what may or may be possible. So clarifying the role is very important. And this is where we can simply set a meeting and look at the framework together and kind of decide, is this a level 2 role? Is it a level 3? What would the honorarium be? And then rather than filling out that peer engagement request form, here you're filling out a peer volunteer registration form. This form is designed so that interior health staff fill out their portion. This is what the role looks like. This would be your key contact. This would be the schedule. And then the peer that is the successful candidate would fill out their portion to tell you a little bit about what's going to help them be successful in the role and their contact and emergency information and so on. And that actually becomes their formal registration, the document that shows that they're now part of the program. And then we would work together again to do that recruiting and the screening, registering, orienting, and training. So often that's the peer coordinator locally who would support that, but we're always here in the background and work very closely with the peer coordinators to support that. And then this is a really important piece, the integrating, supporting, and supervising. And we do have some templates to help clarify who's supervising. Is that someone that the team lead, for example? And if so, then the role of the peer coordinator often becomes more of a supportive role. And so we can help you to make sure that that's all nice and clear. And so this is what the toolkit looks like. I'm going to open it up and share my screen to show you the actual toolkit. But in the meantime, are there any questions? Not hearing any. So this is the Peer Engagement and Inclusion Toolkit. It's on the inside net. You would just go to clinical care resources, to mental health and substance use. And now the toolkits are over on the right-hand side. So they used to be down at the bottom if you're used to that, but they've moved over to the right-hand side, MHSU toolkits. And the peer engagement inclusion is down at the bottom there. So the first link here is our framework, and that's a really good place to go to just see what is a level 2 peer, what is a level 3 peer, to kind of start to think about what it is that makes sense in the context of your team and your program. Then we have our evaluation framework. If you're really interested in how we evaluate, what our theory of change is with this program, that's what that document outlines. And then here's where, as discussed today, if you're thinking advisory group, a one-time or occasional, check-in with some peers, then there's that process that you would want to look at to engage the peer advisory group. This is also where lots of people like to do these fireside chats. It's a great way to engage your whole team, to have a few people. Often it can be a panel of peers on a given topic if you're wanting to talk about OAT or you're wanting to talk about stigma. And then we can work to host a fireside chat with peers, and so that your team can come together and be able to ask questions and hear directly from people with lived expertise, sort of what their experiences have been like, what their thoughts are. So that's another way to do engagement. And then for peer volunteers, here is the process for involving peer volunteers that I was pointing to before, and that really lays out the different steps. And there's lots of other stuff in here, but luckily the peer coordinators help to organize all of those pieces. And then if you're quite interested in how the honorariums work, this is the standardized process and procedure that really lays that out. And there's many other things. This is where we hang on to that handbook for the peer integration for team leaders. And then there are different information bulletins on training and practice supports and hiring and orientation of peer support workers. Should you have the funding or perhaps write an SBAR to get funding for a peer support worker role. Questions about the toolkit? Okay. So I really encourage you to consider if perhaps having an employed peer support worker as a core member of your team might make the most sense when you're thinking about your OAT clinics. If that is the case, I highly encourage you to advocate for the funding for that role. Certainly, looking to budget surplus, especially at this time of year, to determine whether, there could be enough surplus in a program in order to support even a term position for a peer support worker to trial that is a great suggestion. Certainly you can consider writing an SBAR to make that case and that request for a peer support worker to join your team. And if you've got any questions about that, or you even wanted me to look over an SBAR, provide any suggestions, I'm very happy to do that. And those are a couple of references, and then we can pause for questions.
Thanks so much, Allison. It's definitely exciting to hear about some of those new supports, particularly with the peer coordinator role. We will open it up to some general questions from anyone. You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself, type in the chat.
Does anybody have a peer included in their OAT program currently, or is it in other roles? And what does that look like if you have included a peer in an OAT clinic?
Anyone want to jump in? And
hi, it's Sam here in Kelowna. I can just briefly chat about that. We don't currently, unfortunately, have a peer. The line is vacant, but we did for just over a year have a peer support worker full-time with our OAT clinic. We're sadly missing it at this point. It was a new role for us. So we kind of developed it on the fly and really tried to adapt it to what the needs of the clinic were. But ultimately, our peer support worker would be that first point of contact and kind of welcoming agent to the clinic. So she would go and any new patient that we had to the clinic would connect with them, just check in, say, hey, how you doing? Just do a general check-in about needs, even if they just needed someone to sit with them while they were waiting for services or in between services. So it was really important for her to connect with every single person that came to the clinic, and then would support that client kind of throughout the process, would do check-ins with folks folks during the first couple of weeks of their treatment, see how they were doing on their dose, just having that real kind of lived and living experience conversation with folks about what that was like. Would sometimes support with even just something as simple as walking them down to the pharmacy, if that was something that was challenging. She was also doing supporting with missed dose calls. So if she would pull a missed dose list and would contact folks that had missed a dose or two and just check in with them and see how they were doing, see if they needed any support connecting with the clinic. That's just like a very general overview, but she was definitely an asset to the clinic and kind of the flow of the clinic, and just that really just that welcoming piece, and just creating a safe space for our clients to navigate the system. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Do we have any other questions from anyone? Oh, yeah, I see. Cami.
I was just going to add, she was a previous OAT client of mine, so there was a bit of a transition. You know, she was a client in the clinic and then became a peer support worker. So we discussed, you know, how it would be best to do that, and we decided to transfer her care to another clinic so that she could maintain kind of that privacy piece, and then still we could work together, but yeah, that she would no longer be and that was an option in Kelowna, and it might not be an option everywhere, so maybe a conversation around how that works if they are also a client.
If I'm not mistaken, if I'm thinking about the same person, Cami, I believe we're going to have her join the closing Congress to talk a little bit about her role more in detail. So that might be of interest to folks on the line today too. Yeah, and you'll have some opportunity to ask questions and things like that.
I think it's also interesting to share that that person has another peer support worker role. So it's really interesting as Interior Health we grow our opportunities for employment. You know, there become, you know, these chances to kind of look at, does my lived experience fit best with, you know, this particular team and program, or, you know, could I lean into another piece of my lived experience for another team's goals? And so that was pretty neat to see. And I think that there's been some good learning in Kelowna too, and some consideration for potentially moving towards 2 positions rather than 1. So that's something that, you know, if you're looking to maybe be considering employment, to connect in with Nadine Rigby, or, you know, Sam, I'm sure would be willing to chat more about it, but lots of good learnings in that experience. And then the other place I believe there's some peer inclusion happening right now is in Trail. But I think it's, I don't know all of the details of it, but I've been watching the honorariums payments come out, and it's called Peer Voice in the team. So Interior Boost in Trail. So I think that they've been having at least 2 people with lived experience to help inform the work that they're doing on a regular basis. Oh, thanks, Rebecca. She thinks that's specific to the Boost project. Okay, interesting. Not necessarily to the Trail OAT clinic.
Yeah, I'm 98% sure of that, but not totally positive because I'm not there.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have anyone from Trail on the line? I don't know.
Yes, I'm Sarah, the Substance Use Connections clinician, and it is the peer is involved with the Boost initiative only at this point. So,
got you. Okay, thank you. We will just give another couple minutes for questions. If something pops into anyone's head, I'm going to launch our little poll here. But in the meantime, yeah, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to ask. I just want to Thank Allison again for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I know it's still kind of early for some of us, so some of us are still kind of waking up over here. But yeah, thank you, Allison, for joining. And I'm thinking, you know, I'll share kind of that toolkit that you shared with us today and some of the other resources, and you know, share your email again if that's okay, because some people, I think it's easy to forget where to find this stuff sometimes. You know, you kind of have it in the back of your head that you know these resources are available, but you kind of forget where to find them, and then it just kind of gets missed that way. But I can share all of those again.
That sounds great.
Okay. If there's no more questions from everyone, I think we'll wrap up this morning. So I hope you all have a really good day. And yeah, like I said, I will send some follow-up on this after the webinar, and it is recorded. So I will share that link as well, and the slides as well as that. So take care, everyone, and thanks so much.